Scientists of Reddit, what's something you suspect is true in your field of study but you don't have enough evidence to prove it yet? Gut bacteria has evolved to influence our behavior, either directly or indirectly, to crave foods that benefit it. That's why it's hard to come off certain foods. Anecdotally, it's hard to give up high sugar, high fat foods, yet if you go for long enough without them, your desire for them drops massively. I believe it's because the gut flora that likes that food dies off and no longer influences your behavior. It's very, very hard to prove, but it seems self-evident that if bacteria even had the slightest opportunity to evolve a means to do this, it would almost be a certainty. Babies start crawling earlier when they have pets. The Crespi-Badcock hypothesis suggests that autism and schizophrenia are opposite neurological differences. They develop in the womb based on different environmental stressors. Autism arises in a world of excess, while schizophrenia emerges in a world of scarcity. Because of this, a person cannot have both conditions. I believe autism is mainly a first world issue. It is increasing in developed countries but not in developing ones. In today's world, embryos have access to abundant resources, leading to a belief that they can thrive independently. This allows their brains to focus on understanding systems rather than social cues. On the other hand, schizophrenia is more common in developing countries and urban slums. The brain at risk for schizophrenia learns that it is entering a world of scarcity, where understanding others is crucial for survival. Often, the first signs of schizophrenia appear after a traumatic social experience in late adolescence or early adulthood. Autistic individuals may miss social cues, while those with schizophrenia may perceive messages that aren't there, showing hyposensitivity and hypersensitivity to social signals, respectively. Source: I am a general practice physician with a strong interest in psychiatry and behavioral health, and I am on the autism spectrum myself. In cancer treatment, many patients finish their therapy with no signs of remaining cancer. However, it's common for cancer to return years later. The usual belief is that hidden cancer cells remain in the body, which eventually grow into detectable tumors. But this idea raises questions. If cancer cells divide quickly, why does it take 2 to 4 years for the cancer to return? I have an alternative theory. Many patients may actually be cancer-free after treatment, and there are no hidden cancer cells. Instead, what might remain are precancerous cells that can develop into cancer over a few years. Cancer isn't caused by just one gene mutation or a virus. It usually requires multiple mutations in key genes. These mutations come from a pool of precancerous cells, many of which are hard to identify. If a tumor is completely removed, surrounding precancerous cells might look normal and not be taken out. For example, if 4 mutations are needed for cancer, these precancerous cells might have 3. It takes time for the last mutation to occur, which explains why cancer can return after several years. I believe that these recurrences are due to the development of cancer from these primed cells, rather than from hidden cancer cells. Why hasn't this theory been proven? Conducting experiments is challenging for several reasons. Researchers need access to cancer patients and their tissues, and any experiments must be ethical and not harm the patients. Identifying these cells using molecular techniques while the tissue is still in the patient is also difficult and risky. Proving that returning cancer comes from these precancerous cells rather than hidden cancer cells is complex. Animal models could help with this research, but they come with their own challenges. Mice are often used because they are inexpensive, but they only live about 2 years, which may not be enough time for long-term studies. Monkeys live longer, but they are much more expensive to work with. This is a topic I have always wanted to explore, but I haven't had the opportunity to do so. This is fascinating and terrifying all at once. I'm 26 years past treatment for a childhood cancer with 0 recurrences so far, but I always have a fear that something might more or less set off a switch to make the cancer come back. The hidden cell idea honestly never sat right with me based on how fast cancer grows and spreads. As a former math and physics major, I took meticulous notes of my son's epileptic seizures. At one point, I added barometric readings and current weather data to standard information of date, seizure type, and seizure length in seconds. I'm convinced that low-pressure weather systems increase the frequency and intensity of his epileptic seizures. During a trip to North Carolina, the area had an unusually high, stable high-pressure system. He didn't have any seizures during our time there. My theory is that high or low pressure weather systems microscopically change the flow of fluids in the brain or other neurologically sensitive areas of the body, such as the microbiome of the gut. I really am interested in this one. I have epilepsy as well as chronic migraines and noticed my migraines are more frequent with pressure changes associated with weather events. Epilepsy could likely be that way too. Digital communities have replicated the authority, structure, and meaning-making functions of religious communities without their physicality. When I was in college, I took several religion courses on the New Testament and early Christianity. When my professor explained how early Christians would argue over interpretations of the events and interpretations of ministry, referenced the Torah and other Jewish texts for supporting arguments, wrote their own scriptures, and then eventually consolidated those scriptures into a canon, the Bible, my first thought was, oh, that sounds an awful lot online fandoms writing and arguing over fanfic. Neurodiversities are an expression of social evolution, and by trying to get neurodivergent people to be normal, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Millions years ago, organisms went from unicellular to multicellular by having cells join and work together, splitting tasks. Eventually, the system was so complex that today's humans' neurons, for example, can't feed themselves. They have to depend on other cells to help them do basic tasks. Your body is so complex that if some cells stop doing their work, the whole system collapses and you die. So, if you look at society now, we work like this. Some people farm food, others transmit information, others work as society's immune system, and that have allowed us to grow and turn more complex. Basically evolve. Society is now working as a multicellular organism because we have split tasks. Now, neurodiverse people are notorious for not being able to do some very basic things, but they excel at others. Forcing them to act normal and do tasks they can't and someone else could do for them is wasting their specific potential. Hawkins wasn't neurodiverse, but I like to use his disability as an example. Thanks to all the people that worked hard to keep him alive and allowed him the technology to communicate, we got to benefit from his incredible mind. If we had judged him as a burden to society because he couldn't tie his own shoes, we would have lost all his knowledge. By forcing neurodiverse or disabled people to perform normality, mask, instead of giving them help to thrive as they are, society is wasting their potential and slowing our social evolution. Diversity is a necessity for our evolution. Plants might be sentient a bit. Can you elaborate a bit why you think this? I recently read about a plant that can see. Crazy. It's already proven that plants can see if other plants grow around them. That's mainly because the absorbed light has different wavelengths for plants that grow under bigger plants, more green. Plants then adapt by increased elongation of shoots to gain height faster for competition reasons. Plants that don't compete about light may grow more horizontal than vertical. MS can be cured with fecal transplants. I'm a fecal donor. Proud to be making a difference and getting paid to shit. Can you expand on that a little? Anecdotal evidence suggests that the gut biome can somehow trigger MS symptoms, and that fecal transplants can fix that. Currently, it is mostly used to treat C. diff infection, but there are indications it could do much more. The oceans are incredibly, catastrophically, incomprehensibly fucked. We've been using the oceans at a high level for centuries, and our awareness of the impact on the oceans has come far too late. We just don't have enough data from before industrialization to understand what we've done. My biologist roommate years ago said the same thing about bugs, that there's less of them every year. What's strange is that his research was funded by the oil and gas industry. Microbiologist. Our only hope in being able to fight off total antibiotic resistance is to develop bacteriophages, viruses that destroy bacteria, that we can use and prescribe in place of existing antibiotics. I'm still boggled as to why the US doesn't use bacteriophage therapy as a last resort. Phages can go astray, and it's one of the reasons we can't effectively treat people with them yet. Long story short, phages can sometimes become incorporated into the bacterial DNA and actually becomes a virulence factor, and there's not a ways to know if they will cause bacteria to change and become more deadly accidentally. No necessarily a field of science, I guess technically it is, but I worked in drug alcohol treatment for a few years, and it was widely accepted that anyone and everyone could get clean and sober from drugs and alcohol. However, I have never seen anyone get clean off fentanyl after using for many years. By some, it is believed that once you have carved that behavior in your brain for long enough, and with strong enough substance, it is over for you. Typically fentanyl, as it is so strong on the brain and kids are using it so young, that they are not really giving themselves a chance at life, which can be as early as elementary school. Along those lines, once you cross the line of dependence on drugs, there is no going back. Once an addict, always an addict. You can't prove it, but I believe this to be so. That's even minor differences in how you compress and EQ a singer or rapper's vocals in a song can literally affect the emotional reaction a listener has when hearing the song. Do you know of another scientific theory for which there is no evidence yet? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.